Welcome, welcome, welcome to another segment of Michelle Speaks. If you hide it, you can't heal it. I am Michelle Portier, the host of the hour. And as you know, we like to highlight individuals that have overcome adversities and have turned those adversities into victories. And they are now giving back in their respective communities, sharing how they were able to overcome what they encountered, what they're doing, and what you too can do to overcome any adversities that you are encountering. And so our goal is to provide help, produce hope, and promote healing. And so you are in for a treat today as I have with me here a very special guest hailing all the way virtually from Canada, Miss Kristen Toppin, author, Canadian veteran, and powerhouse of overcoming adversity. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce to you all that are tuning in, Miss Kristen Toppin. Kristen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I have to admit that when you reached out to me, I totally fangirled. We are a big fan of Michelle Speaks here in Canada.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. From one powerhouse to another, I appreciate that. And so, we had an extensive conversation about some of the challenges that you encountered and the obstacles that you encountered while you were in the military. And I believe we touched on some things prior to. And during that process, you kind of had to revamp or recreate yourself. And so before we get into that, I just want you to share with my listening audience, because I know, from the time that we've been able to chat, I know a little bit about who you are. And so share with us, Kristen, who is Kristin Topping personally, professionally, and spiritually?
So I do define myself as a 22-year veteran of the Canadian Forces. I joined when I was 17. And now I've transitioned from the military just this past July, and I'm now a small business owner for a exotic plant shop that does all e-commerce sales called Sweet Life Flora. In addition, I have written a book called Propagated from the Ashes, like the title of your blog today. And it tells my story about how the last 4 years of my time in the military were fairly rough because I had to get over a traumatic brain injury that fundamentally changed me as a person. So, yeah, from a relationship standpoint, I'm a wife and a sister and a daughter. And all of those relationships have been so important to me through my journey. Spiritually, I consider myself a bit of a secular Buddhist. I believe in mindfulness, particularly mindful horticulture. And I subscribe to not really the beliefs, but the principles and the values that are within the philosophy of Buddhism.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So there you have it, just a little bit more about who Kristen is. We're going to delve a little deeper into that. And I look forward to hearing more about the mindfulness. And I forgot what else you said because but we'll dive into that. And so going back to what you said, first of all, again, thank you again for your service.
Thank you.
And, persevering through the things that you encountered. And
you as well, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That's what we do. We adapt and overcome, right? So for our listening audience, you touched on how, the last 4 years in your service, that they were challenging. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how that has impacted, how you were impacted personally by your injuries and by the experiences that you encountered during your service?
So it actually goes a little bit further back than 4 years. When I joined, I went to the Royal Military College. And there I played rugby as my sport of choice. And as you know, rugby is quite difficult. It's also full impact. So I had a couple of undiagnosed concussions while I was at military college. And unfortunately, I didn't realize it at the time, but they had affected me. They affected my ability to focus. They affected my relationships when I was in university. And I made it through. And because you do what you got to do to get through. But if you fast forward 14 years later, in 2016, I was away. I was actually in Florida. on a conference for work, and I suffered a traumatic brain injury on a roller coaster.
Wow.
So I'm very lucky that it was a work trip, because otherwise things would be a lot more complicated as I'm releasing from the military.
Mm-hmm.
But that experience fundamentally changed me as a person on a physiological level, in my brain, the way I process information. I completely changed as a person. So prior to my injury, I was an engineer in the Air Force. And all of a sudden, after my injury, I didn't think the same way. I wasn't as good at time managing. I wasn't as good at processing information as it came my way. So it took me 4 months before I actually saw a doctor. A lot of this has to do with military mentality and the you suck it up until you can't do anything else. It was, sorry, go ahead.
So I just wanted to touch on that key thing, two things that you said. Prior to your injury, you were an engineer.
Yeah.
Time management was something that you excelled in, and your cognitive was very, at a different level. And
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
after the injury and prior to you being, seen for it, what were some of the day-to-day challenges that you encountered? Because I, too, not for the same reason, I had a series of accidents and had encountered a TBI, and I was very frustrated because things were not moving quickly, and I wasn't processing things, and things that took me maybe an hour or so to do, or maybe 5 minutes to do, now took all day. So kind of tell us about what that was like.
So my day-to-day changed with respect to the workplace, but also at home. So I had just gotten married, or actually we were a year away from getting married. So our relationship, Steve and I, we were only a year in. I rely on him so heavily now. Whereas before I used to be incredibly independent. Now I need help, I guess, problem solving a little bit. He does all the cooking because I have a habit of leaving pans on the stove. He does a lot of the dishes and things like that, just because it takes me a really long time to get from the beginning to the end of a task. These are things that people take for granted. In addition, at work, I was a go-getter. I was one of those people who was very deadline driven, and I set my own deadlines. I was pretty independent at work. But after my concussion, and actually one of the reasons why I didn't go to the doctor is because I had all these self-imposed deadlines in my project management job. Unfortunately, I missed every single one of my deadlines in that 4 months. I would get frustrated at work. I was under fluorescent lights in a cubicle situation, and I was looking at a screen all day. All of those things are counterproductive to recovering from a concussion. The reason why I figured out I needed to go to the doctor is because one day I got so overwhelmed, I ended up crying in an electrical closet for 3 hours.
Oh my goodness, that was definitely that something was wrong and you needed help, right?
I needed somewhere quiet that was dark and that nobody knew where I was, so they couldn't find me. So here I am, a senior officer, a major, crying in a closet because there's something so fundamentally wrong with me that I can't figure it out on my own.
Right, exactly. And so I just kind of wanted you to paint the picture for, anyone that may be living with the TBI, or maybe they haven't been diagnosed but know that they've had injuries, so they can identify what some of the symptoms might be. I know for myself, whereas before having a lot of external, noise and different things going on didn't bother me before, I find now that I'm challenged. If there are too many things going on, something has to stop. Like, if people are having conversations and I'm having a conversation with someone, or I'm trying to do a task and there's too many external, variables, then I have to kind of shut that down. Did you experience anything like that?
Absolutely. External stimuli was like hot on my radar all the time. It would actually raise my anxiety levels to the point where I would have to leave the situation. Now, the power of neuroplasticity and your brain fixing itself and getting better is that I think my brain has rewired itself, and I'm okay at those things now. Like, I can look at a screen. Fluorescent lights, maybe not so much, but I can be around people again. Not huge crowds, but I can be around people, which is a great thing.
What was the time frame between you starting to get the help? Because you said you didn't seek, not that you didn't seek, but you didn't start getting help until 4 months later. So when you were encountering, did you encounter bouts of depression, and how did that impact how you were at work? And what challenges did you have dealing with maybe your cohorts at work, because maybe they didn't understand some of the challenges that you were encountering?
So just prior to my concussion, maybe a few years before, I had been having issues with stress management already. I was a person that just took on way too much. I didn't know how to say no. I could do everything. I was a superhero. And then after my concussion, it all just collapsed. So not only could I not stress manage, but I was also incredibly hard on myself. So when I originally had my concussion, I actually thought I'd shaken all my other head injuries off. This one I'll just shake it off. It'll be fine. And this one, it didn't happen. I kept expecting myself to go back to the way I was. And unfortunately, I had unrealistic expectations for myself. So I went into a pretty deep downward spiral very quickly with respect to my mental health. So definitely depression, anxiety, panic attacks. I had it all.
Right. And so how were you able to navigate through some of that, the anxiety, the panic attacks, the depression?
Yeah, so my husband definitely helped, but when I eventually sought help in April of 2017, their first stop was for me to see a psychiatrist and a psychologist. Being able to talk about my expectations for myself and to figure out what was realistic and what wasn't. Also, the fact that feeling down after a concussion is perfectly normal. I thought there was something wrong with me aside from the head injury, but it really turns out that all of the things that I was feeling mentally were completely normal.
And what were some of those things?
Oh, I felt like I was absolutely useless. Like I couldn't do a lot of physical tasks. I couldn't do my work. I couldn't do physical activity anymore. I think that's the one that hit me the worst, is because I was always such an active person. But then going outside, even in the sunlight, or like going for a run, would raise my physiological symptoms so much that I couldn't do it anymore. And I just felt so terrible about myself. I thought I was worthless.
And so I know that there are many people that are listening in that can relate to that. What was the thing that turned you around?
So it was a combination of things, really. I have always been a big plant collector and into horticulture. When I was growing up, we had a garden. I wasn't good at taking care of myself at that point in time, but I could focus on my indoor garden. At that point in time as well, I also became, so you find things to replace what you can't do. So the thing that I found is I started heavily collecting plants, like to the point where we were taking over not only our house, but I would put stuff in my mom's house. I would put stuff in my sister's house, until our current house that we're now living in, which is big enough to house all my plants, existed. But yeah, I started collecting plants and taking care of plants. And it made me feel good that I could make them thrive, even though I was struggling on my own. So I've sort of developed a bit of a self-care practice called mindful horticulture, which takes all of the things that you like about, meditating and sitting still. And for those people who aren't very good at sitting still and aren't very good at clearing their mind, I know, totally me. you apply those practices and being in the present and just looking at your plants, judging their health from yesterday to today, figuring out what they need to continue to survive. That's a way of being mindful about what you're doing. So if you can apply it to a simple task like horticulture, it can make you a better horticulturalist, but it can also get you out of your own head.
Mm-hmm. So being intentional about focusing on something external rather than the things that are churning around in your head. Right. So what has been or continues to be the secret to how you maintain on a daily basis? People say that there's a secret to success. And from a dear friend of mine, there is no secret, it's a system. So what is your system daily to ensure that you're staying on task, that you are managing your own self-care, but you're also, using the gift that you were given to share with the world?
So I would say that understanding that self-care isn't selfish is the biggest thing for me. Before my injury, I was very bad at taking care of my mental self. I was really good at taking care of my physical self. I ate right and I worked out, but taking care of my mental self wasn't something that I valued or even thought was important. So my day-to-day now starts with, even if I don't have to, I get up at the same time as my husband to go to work. Routine. I'm in school right now, so I'm taking horticultural industries at Algonquin College. And so I get myself ready for class the same way every single day. I'll do classes, then I'll take care of myself, do some mindful horticulture in between classes and after classes. And my business, which unfortunately has taken a little bit of a back burner right now while I'm in school. I still have to do stuff every day for it, though. I have to take care of the plants that I'm selling. I have to, do day-to-day finances and things like that. As long as I have a routine, I'm good to go. But as soon as anything like weird happens and I have to do a rescheduling thing, I need some notice. So, basically having a routine.
Yeah, routine is key for you then.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so how has it impacted, you said you were a mother. How has that impacted your relationship with your...
So I'm not a mother. I have 3 dogs and a cat. So I guess I'm a pet mother.
Right.
I also have a niece and a nephew who are very, very close to us. So they spend a lot of time with us. I actually find that I've gotten closer to both my animals and the children in my life because I'm able to step away easier from my work life and anything else that's going on. So because I've valued myself enough to be able to take that step away, I can have more mindful interactions and relationships with them.
That was key that you said that, having more mindful interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Because, today, especially with this new way of living with COVID, it's very challenging at times to have mindful interactions and be intentional about staying connected. So how have you been able to do that?
I'm actually an introvert. So staying at home and being a bit more of a homebody has actually helped me more than it's hindered me. So I always struggled in like big group situations. I always got incredibly nervous. I was the friend that would like cancel out at the last minute because I was a bit anxious about going to parties and things like that. So actually interacting on Zoom, having class by Zoom, yes, there's Zoom fatigue, but it's actually been really good for me. I've been able to focus on myself more, not worry so much about going into activities where there's going to be lots of people, where there's going to be unpredictable things happening. So this has actually been pretty okay for me. My business has done well too during this because everyone wants houseplants.
And so one of our listeners that are tuning in said, her name is Trinette. Hi, Miss Trinette. Miss Trinette Smith. She said, self-care isn't being selfish.
Exactly.
So key, because I think we're taught, well, I believe women by nature are nurturers. So we are so focused on caring and nurturing it for everybody else that we often put ourselves at the bottom of the totem pole. And so we experience a lot of burnout a lot quicker. and then feel guilty, for taking the time to take care of ourselves. So it's important that you brought that out. And so I want to go back to the nature, because I believe, your plants are connected to nature. And I've always thought that, nature has a healing quality that nothing else can mimic. No amount of therapy, no amount of meds can mimic that. And so how were you able to use that, caring for your plants and connecting with nature to continue to heal from your injury?
So connecting with nature is absolutely key for anybody getting over any sort of trauma or a mental health issue. It is one of the easiest distractors from your own life. So you can easily go outside and focus on something different. For me, I'm actually taking horticulture industries so I can extend my reach out to nature a little bit more, so I can functionally garden. I can functionally do these things, even though I still have limitations. I do think connecting with nature is something that humans fundamentally do. I wouldn't be alive probably without my garden, because I would still be stuck in the ruts that I was in, dealing with my concussion.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit more about how your book Propagated from the Ashes came to be. How did you birth it out? What was the process?
It was a fluke. So my publisher is Golden Brick Road Publishing House, and they're an Ottawa-based woman-run business, which is so important to me, local and supporting fellow women. So I reached out to them because my friend had published with them previously. Hi, Carly. And so because of that, I reached out to them and I'm like, I really feel like I need to tell my story. Not only will it help other veterans, but it will help anybody who's had a traumatic brain injury. It will help anybody who's gone through any sort of trauma. Mindful horticulture even can just be out to anybody who's been lucky enough not to experience anything, to be able to use it as their self-care practice. So because my indoor garden was so important to me, I wanted to be able to show people how it could change their lives, how just interacting with plants and living material could make them feel normal again, make them redefine their purpose.
Yes, I love that, redefine their purpose. So Heath Haven said, yes, getting out in nature helps me, that this isolation is not the greatest. And so for someone that is tuning in right now and they are having a challenge, and maybe they've encountered, maybe not a TBI, but some kind of trauma, and they are stuck in their heads, they're isolating themselves in the house, what word of encouragement or advice, what would you say to them right now if they were listening in?
So I would say, get outside every day if you can, even just to feel the sun and the wind and the air on your skin. It's empowering to leave your space of comfort. It makes you feel like my space of comfort is absolutely outside, but my cuddle up, watch Netflix, and that is my preferred space of comfort most of the time when I'm not feeling great. You'll become a more productive human being just by giving yourself those few minutes of self-care outside.
So nature is where it's at, which is what I've always thought. Some people call me crazy. I love to climb mountains and, jump out of planes and stuff like that. Won't be doing that anytime soon, but I just always am very connected to nature. And honestly, for me, I believe that I am feeling closer to my Abba, Heavenly Father, when I'm up in the mountains and there's no technology, no phones, just nature and birds singing and things like that.
Absolutely. No distractions.
Shakoya Ase Taylor says yes to Netflix. And she is also a bit of a health enthusiast. And so she's a fellow veteran as well. And so you've got quite a few ladies that are tuning in, sending much love your way. And so Propagated from the Ashes, how did you come up with that title? What does that mean to you?
So I really feel that I sort of had to reinvent what the new me was in order to accept myself again. So basically, everything that happened at the point of concussion, it was like crashed and burned.
Mhm.
Before, I was someone incredibly different, and I needed to learn to, sorry.
What did that look like, the before, the Kristen before and the Kristen after? If you can give a couple of examples.
Okay, so as an engineer, I was very goal oriented. I was a overachiever, I guess is the best word for it. I was one of those people who everyone else in my office would have one project. I'd be working on 3 full time. I was working like 12-hour days, and it was go, 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 go. If someone asked me to do something, I would take it on. I was just that person. I left very little time to take care of myself. And now afterwards, some days it takes all of my energy just to get myself through the day, let alone anything else that I have to worry about for everyone else. It sounds a little bit selfish, but I had to learn how to say no when things were not only outside. I would teach myself things if they were outside of my wheelhouse. Like I completely learned how to code. I don't know how anymore. I completely learned how to code because someone asked me to.
Right.
That is unrealistic.
That is something that I would definitely not have taken on.
Yeah, it's completely unrealistic. So now I focus on becoming excellent at what I'm good at and not halfway's good at a whole lot of things.
Right, right. Yes, Sequoia is mimicking what I have, what I believe, what my belief is about the word no. No is a complete sentence. No, no exclamation, no explanations. No dot dot dot. Just no. Period or
Yeah.
exclamation point. Yeah, and
For me, it
so
would be like, no, I don't code, but I could learn.
right.
Now I'm like, no, you need to spend the money to hire an expert to do that because I'm not an expert.
Exactly. But you're an expert in what you're an expert in, which is sweet life flora, right?
Exactly, plants. And I have recently found that I absolutely love writing.
Okay.
If you would have asked me that before my concussion, that was like my least favorite thing to do, my least favorite part of my job. But now I love being able to express myself through the written word.
Right. And what do you focus on? Do you have a particular genre or do you just write?
So I have a fairly active Instagram account where I've created a plant community. It's at Sweet Life Flora, so it's my business, but I do a lot of plant education pieces. So right now I'm doing a series on debunking plant care myths. So weird random things you hear from your grandmother's grandmother that are not things you need to do for your plants at all.
Right.
So I've been doing that series. I did a series on light. I did a series on pest management. So I'm really all about educating people about proper plant care, trying to get more people fostering the plant community.
Well, education is key on anything, you
Mhm.
know, from learning how to deal with TBI, from learning how to recover from trauma. How important is it, do you believe, to have a good support system? And how important do you believe it is to be able to journal, to be able to write down what you're experiencing so that you don't hold it in?
So I do also use my Instagram platform as a awareness platform for trauma
Okay.
and for mindful horticulture. So one day I was having a really tough time. And so I wrote about it on my platform, and you wouldn't believe the number of supporters that were like, you know what? I've been there. I've done that. So having my followers on Instagram is one thing, but then my local support community has been so incredible. I couldn't have done it without my husband, Steve. He is the most patient, loving, helpful man that I've ever met. And I'm glad that I waited until I was like in my 30s before I met him and settled down, because I made sure that I didn't settle and I got exactly what I deserved. And he's wonderful.
And that is key for those that are looking to for a significant other. Make sure
Mhm.
that you don't settle and
Yeah.
that you know your worth so that you're valuable enough to receive what you believe that you deserve.
Exactly.
I'm glad that
And I'm also really lucky that my family has all moved closer to me. So we used to be spread out all over Canada. Now my mom lives 15 minutes away from me. My sister lives maybe half an hour away from me with her family. And my brother only lives 5 hours away in Toronto. So that might seem like a long way, but we get to see each other so much more. And they've all recently had babies. So we get to hang out with their kids and do a lot of things together. And I've also made some really good friends in the plant community. Delta Thompson's is like one of my best friends who I've met since my concussion. We met at concussion rehab.
Okay.
So we have that common background, and we have the plant community together because she also has a plant business.
Right.
And like, I've met so many girls. We call it family dinner. Usually pre-COVID on every Sunday, a bunch of girls would get together who are in the plant community, and we would have dinner. My husband would cook for us, and we would sit and gab.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So I have one of our Sequoia again stated support and family is so important. And I agree with that. And so it sounds like you've created this whole community since, having your TBI and creating that whole new life. And so how often are you connected? Do you stay connected with your community, and how do you stay connected, especially, not post-COVID because we're still in the midst of it, but
every day. I believe that the future of staying connected with a more global community is through social media. I wasn't very familiar with social media pre-concussion or pre-business, but it's definitely become something that is an integral part of my day. I post every day, whether it's something educational or something about me or something about my family or something about my plants. It is so important to make that connection every day so people know that you're there for them.
Right. So does that cause you any more anxiety of knowing that you have to post every day, or is it not something that you have to do? It's something that you look forward to.
So anything plant related, I always look forward to. I will admit that it's completely out of my wheelhouse to promote my book. It's not within a woman's wheelhouse to promote herself. I am not good at it. So I've actually hired a PR agent, and she's been super, super helpful. Just getting me involved. Okay, I've never had a Twitter account. So she got me a Twitter account. I believe it's Propagated from the Ashes. And I've learned so much from her. Sometimes just reaching out to the experts and asking for their help is something that's invaluable.
So what insight can you provide to someone? I have one of our listeners make a statement: support is key, but learning to accept the support is hard when you're used to being so independent. So I know you mentioned earlier that prior to your injuries, you were very independent. So what can you share with someone that is very independent, but now are in a position where they have to accept support, and they may not know how to ask for it, or they may not know how to receive the support even though they ask for it? What would you say?
So this was actually one of the hardest things for me, was actually asking for help, whether it was medically or just even saying like, I can't hit that deadline. What can I do? Is there any way we can work around it? I think it's about starting with little pieces. So right now I had shoulder surgery 3 weeks ago. So every morning my husband has to put my hair in a ponytail. So start small, because I can't lift my arm above my shoulders yet. So even after my concussion, it was like, I'm sorry, babe, I just need some help waking up and getting excited about the day. So what can you do for me? It's even just if someone else reaches out to you and asks you if you need help, being okay to say you're not okay. That was the hardest part. And it's okay to not be okay all the time.
Yes. There's a song, I believe her name is Jessie Bender or something like that. And there's actually a song that said it's okay not to be okay.
Yeah, everyone has moments. Everyone needs help sometimes.
Right.
But my husband will still say my biggest flaw is that I don't ask for help all the time when I need it. It's the independent streak.
Right. And so how have you been able to kind of make progress in that?
So I guess one of the ways that I've been able to make progress is to understand that I don't need to say sorry anytime someone helps me. It's a little bit of a Canadian thing to say sorry all the time, to apologize for everything, regardless of whether it's your fault or not.
Yeah.
So it's actually one of the traits you can pick up a Canadian by. Not only do we say A, but we say sorry a lot. So I've actually learned that when someone says, hey, can I help you? And they help you, that an appropriate replacement for sorry is thank you. So extending a thank you for their help rather than apologizing for needing help in the first place.
And so one of the other comments was, I'm okay with not being okay, but sharing the feeling is hard. So how would you address that? Because I know it can be challenging to say to someone, hey, I'm not okay, because I know the next question is going to be, well, how can I help you, or how can I support you? And sometimes you may not know, so what would you say to that?
There were a lot of people who read my book, who were close to me, who I consider close to me, who had no idea that I went through what I went through because I didn't talk about it. Only the people who, like my husband, who I saw every day, it's not good not to talk about it. So if you're uncomfortable about talking to it with someone who's close to you, sometimes it's okay to go and talk to someone professional. They provide a second opinion. They are the ones who are going to tell you, you're not acting crazy. Like, this is perfectly normal following an injury, because they have that educational experience to be able to say that. And sometimes it's just getting an expert opinion makes you feel that you're not in the wrong.
Right. And Bruce Thompson also chimed in and said that he loves that it is okay not to be okay. So you got quite feedback today. And it is true, and even though we know it sometimes, we may know it here, but sometimes it's hard for us to verbalize it or even accept it within I won't use anybody else. I'll say for me, even though I know that, sometimes it's hard to be like, hey, I'm not okay. I don't what I need. I don't think it's the fact that people don't know what they need. I believe that they're fearful to really express or share what they truly need. What are your thoughts on that?
Particularly if it's like physically, if you're having a problem and it's an invisible injury, it's harder to ask for help if people can't physically see that there's something wrong with you and that you need help because of something other than an injury, for say. I had a brain injury. You can't see my brain. So I need to express to people, okay, so this happened to me. And unfortunately, you have to tell people what happened to you. And this is why I need help. So I do think that sometimes there's not necessarily the expectation that if someone sees that you're struggling, that they'll know that you need help. They need to be a little bit prompted sometimes. And that's the hardest thing to do. But you'll both feel better about not only asking for help, but helping someone who needed help.
Right. And that's where I believe that vulnerability kicks in. So easy to say the word, but so hard to actually live it, allowing yourself to become vulnerable. So, Kristen, what has been or what was one of the most defining moments just throughout your whole life,
Actually, I write about it specifically in my book. It is that moment where I decided that getting out of the military was the right choice, and that I wasn't who I wanted to be. My new me wasn't who I wanted to be being in the military or applying for jobs that were exactly the same as what I was doing in the military already. So there was an intervention that happened. One of my really best friends, Sue Ellen, and my sister sat down with me in public and publicly confronted me about saying, hey, you're not okay. We recognize that you're not okay, and you need to stop thinking you're going to be who you were before your head injury. I don't like crying in public, but that day I bawled in a public place. It's actually a frozen ice cream place, like a frozen yogurt place, and I was like bawling because I knew they were right, but it's hard to hear it from other people.
The truth sometimes, especially from those we love.
Yeah, especially when they're saying that you are not going to be who you were before pre-injury. And that is all I wanted from life. But then they followed it up with, you love your plants. You are so good at taking care of plants, and you're so good about educating other people about how to take care of their plants.
Right.
Why don't you open your own business, sell plants, and like tell people how to take care of them? Like, you can enable people to have their own indoor garden. So I needed to hear this is how you were before. You're not this anymore, but this is what you're good at now. So it literally was an intervention in a public place where I had to be shocked into understanding what I should be doing.
Don't you hate it when that happens sometimes? But you said something that was very key. You had to accept that you were no longer going to be who you were before, and your life was no longer going to be the way that you had envisioned it to be. How hard was it to accept that?
It's like the death of a person. It's going through the same grief stages that you do if you lost someone very close to you. You lost yourself. You lost who you were previously. So I had to first, accepting is the last thing. You go through a depression, you go through a downtime, you start to question why this happened to you, and blaming. And if I hadn't gone to Florida, if I hadn't gotten onto that roller coaster, well, done is done, you gotta suck it up and deal with it. But it takes time. But it's definitely a grief process, just like the death of a loved one. And it's okay to be going through that. It's hard, though, with an invisible injury, for other people to understand that you are just going through a process. So talking about it and what happened to you and why you are different is so important.
I really love what you said about it's a process, because I think in today's society, we've become so used to this microwavable, instantaneous solutions to how we deal with things, that actually taking the time to have to submit and go through a process can be the most challenging thing. Myself included, because I grew up knowing that, okay, if we have a challenge, let's identify that challenge. Let's make a plan to correct it. Let's implement it, and let's move on to the next thing. But
sounds like you grew up exactly how I did.
Right. And so you can't do that. And so you said something else that I believe that was crucial as well. You said that, for those on the outside looking in that may not understand, that you have an invisible wound, and so they don't know, how would you share with someone how to go about educating someone about, not necessarily about their injury, but how to allow them the time and space to navigate through the process, if it's someone that's, that's in their circle, in their community?
Yeah, so I actually am so proud of the media for raising more awareness towards concussions. People know that a concussion can fundamentally affect you now. So my answer to this question would have been totally different 20 years ago when I suffered the concussions that I did. I used to just pick up and continue playing after, my brain had been shaken around. I would continue going to school. I would continue doing this. But now that there's an understanding that there are long-term effects to concussions, I think people are more open to understanding and being aware that it is a major injury. Your brain is responsible for everything your body does. So the way that I would approach people is, particularly if I was struggling and if they were seeing that I was struggling, be like, okay, you don't know this, but a few years ago, I suffered a traumatic brain injury. It still affects me. I'm still in the process of recovery. I haven't plateaued yet. And sometimes I need some help. It's a little harder if your injury or what's going on with you is less understood. Because then you have to go into more detail, and sometimes that's the hard part.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, our tagline, Michelle Speaks, if you hide it, you can't heal it. No matter how challenging it is, you have to address it to be able to move beyond it.
Yeah, and the military adages about, sucking it up and getting over it, they are antiquated and old, and they do not apply to anyone, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation. You can't just get over something that is a physical, emotional, or mental injury.
Have you found that since you started sharing on a national platform about the challenges that you've encountered with that injury, respected to the military community, have you received more support now, or has anybody reached back out to you to say that they now have a better understanding, or maybe offer an apology where they may have been kind of insensitive because they didn't really understand what it was that you were encountering?
So I recently got a text message forwarded to me from my PR person, and it was of someone who had read my book, and they had suffered an injury that had systemic effects, and they didn't know what was going on with them. So the whole reason why I wrote the book was to help people. And then hearing that I helped someone be able to identify the help that they needed to seek medically was, it was heartwarming. Like, the amount of support that I've gotten from other people for actually speaking out about concussions and about how self-care is an important part of taking care of yourself post-concussion has been overwhelming. Like, people have been so amazing. Or they've come out of the woodwork and been like, my sister's brother's friend had a concussion, and I'm realizing now that they were really struggling. So there's no 6 degrees of separation with concussions. Everyone knows someone that has had a concussion or a hit to the head or an invisible injury. So you're easily able to identify with people who are actually speaking out about these things.
That's awesome, because honestly, I was in that ranking of those that kind of took concussions pretty much, lightly, like it was no big deal.
Oh yeah, me too.
Until I encountered it, and didn't really recognize that was something that I was encountering. I didn't make the connection between the two until a much later date. Yep. And so, yeah, I appreciate you so much for sharing and being so open and candid about your journey with, how you redefined your life, before and after a TBI, or a traumatic brain injury, for those that may not know what TBI is. And so, what insights can you share with those tuning in about how they can continue to live an abundant, productive, and prosperous life? And it may not be a TBI that they have. It may be a traumatic event. It may be, whatever it may be. What can you share with them today to help them to move beyond that and actually to get the help that they need so that they can continue to thrive?
I would say there's 3 things. I've talked about all of them today. The first one is, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, you know what, I'm going to do this tomorrow instead of today. The second thing is, self-care isn't selfish. You need to prioritize yourself to be able to take care of others. And as a woman, We naturally take care of others, but we're never going to be as good at it until we've taken time for ourselves. And the third thing is that plants make people happy. So if you want to try mindful horticulture, it's just a matter of going out and getting some herbs that you can grow on your kitchen window, or going out and get a house plant, or planting something outside, and you will see how much that will elevate your day just to be able to interact with them.
Right. Well, I definitely do not have a green thumb in any way, shape, or form. I
No
actually,
such thing.
huh?
No such thing. I can
But
teach anyone how to take care of plants.
oh, really? So you want
Mhm.
to take it? Okay. I'm a hold.
Challenge.
I can hold you to that because I'm known for killing plants.
Oh, I can totally help you out.
Thank you so much. So, for those that are tuning in, can you share with them, Kristen, a takeaway and a call to action?
I would say my takeaways are just that. Recognize when things aren't going well for you and that you do need help. Mindful horticulture is a really great way to prioritize your self-care through looking out for something else that's not yourself. It is an attention diverter. You're still able to be mindful. You don't have to meditate, because I can't sit still and meditate. And my call for action would be, take care of yourself. And if you'd like, you can go out and buy my book. It's on Amazon right now, and it's called Propagated from the Ashes. And I truly hope that it helps anybody out there suffering from any sort of physical injury, mental injury, traumatic brain injury, or any sort of trauma.
Thank you so much, Kristen. I will tell you that I just feel like I have been refreshed just listening to your journey of how you propagated from the ashes and how you turned something that may have caused someone else to stop living, how you turned that and you created a new way of living, but you're also now helping others to identify their challenges that they may not have realized. So I wanted to thank you for taking the time to come on and speak with us and share with us how we too can use nature to kind of find our way back to thriving. Some of the things that really resonated with me were some of the things that you said. You stated when asking for help, because I know that can be challenging for many of us, start small, start with the little pieces. And some of the other things that you said, I think that was really profound for me, was that self-care isn't selfish. In order to be able to help others, you have to prioritize yourself to be able to continue to help others. And so that was one of the things that resonated with me. And you shared also about some of the challenges that you had were that you had self-imposed deadlines and that you were very self-critical. But I'm finding, listening to you today, that I don't think that that's any longer an issue with you, right?
Nope.
Right.
Honestly, I love the person I became after my recovery from a traumatic brain injury. It took a long time to accept who I was and that I wasn't going to be the same person, but I truly love who I've become.
Awesome, awesome. So I want to say thank you to your friends that loved you enough to challenge you and put you on the spot and be like, hey, you're beating yourself up, you're not going to go back to being this person, but this is what you can do to move forward, and that honestly is a true friend. That is someone that truly loves you, and truly cares for you. So if you're tuning in, examine the circles that are in your life. If you have people that are in your circle that are not challenging you, that are not confronting you, and that are not identifying your blind spots to you, then those, you might want to reassess those that are in your inner circle. That was one of the takeaways that I got from you, Kristen. Did you have any parting thoughts that you wanted to share? And Miss Heath Haven said, thank you, Kristen, and for sharing. Thank you. So did you have any parting thoughts?
I just want to say thank you so much for providing this platform for anyone to, express themselves, express what happened and how they can help other people. I am and continue to be a Michelle Speaks fangirl, and I am joining your club. I'm on board.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to share that I am on board now with Sweet Life Flora. For those of you that want to connect with Kristen and continue to follow her on all of her social media platforms, Go to her website that's scrolling across the screen right now. Screen right now. It's sweetlifeflora.ca for Canada. I have truly been empowered and inspired today, and I hope that you can say the same. And so, thank you all again for tuning in to another segment of Michelle Speaks with a Z. If you hide it, you can't heal it. I look forward to having you all on again as we move on to our next segment later on today. But I want to thank Kristen again for tuning in and joining in and sharing her heart and her journey with us. And I hope that you have been inspired and that you've been blessed. Please share this with those that you may have identified in listening today that may be having some challenges that this will inspire. And make sure that you connect with Kristen on Instagram and on Twitter and on Facebook, I believe, if you're on there.
Yep.
And be on the lookout for the takeaways and the recap of today's Propagated from the Ashes with Kristen Toppin. So without further ado, thank you guys again. Thank you again, Kristen, for tuning in. And we will see you all next time. Take care, be well, and God bless.